Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our monthly get-together. Today we have Craig Campobasso that's going to be with us, sharing his interesting background and work that he's been doing lately. We'll learn more about that shortly. Uh, First of all, let me give a little bit of a background of Craig's. And Craig, you can feel free to correct me if I misspeak on any of these. First of all, Craig was a multiple award-winning filmmaker, Emmy-nominated casting director. After graduating from high school, Craig went to work behind the scenes on such classic films such as Frank Herbert's Dune, that's the original back in the 80s, and two Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, Conan the Destroyer and Total Recall. Craig's mother, from a time that Craig was very young, kept telling him that she believed he was going to become a writer. So I guess he really went out of his way and proved her correct, because that's exactly what Craig has become. Um, is Also, Craig had a spiritual awakening, and uh, that's when in the autobiography of an extraterrestrial came to mind for him, and he wrote a four-part book series was born on that subject. Um, Craig has also appeared on many radio shows, including Coast to Coast AM with George Dury. He has also been on History Channel's The Ancient Aliens with Giorgio Tsakoulis, and he will soon appear on Travel Channel's UFO Witness and Gaia TV's Deep Space. His latest MUFON book, UFO Hotspot Compendium, all of the places to visit before you die or are abducted. That kind of covers it, then, pretty much. Okay, so now a little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to ask you all to remain muted. Um, and what we're going to do, Bruce Pearson is going to be going through the an interview discussion process with Craig. Craig is going to be providing a lot of information about himself, as well as the direction he is off and running in right now. All good, interesting stuff. And also next month, on April 28th, we will have Doug Auld as our guest. Now, for those of you who do know or do not know Doug Auld, Doug is a very accomplished artist. He's also a playwriter. He has a play that I'm sure he'll tell us all about when he's on. And he's also taken a lot of photographs in the New York City vicinity of UFOs, some fascinating objects. Anyway, that's the housekeeping for today. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Bruce, and then Bruce will go on with Craig Campobasso.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
Joe. And I want to welcome everybody tonight and thank you for joining us. What we're going to do is we'll go through the interview. And if you have any questions that come up during the interview, just go ahead and type them in the chat, first of all. And then we're going to open it up. You can bring your cameras up later when we open the Q&A, and we'll take anybody's questions live for Craig as much time as necessary to do that. So, Craig, go ahead and take the lens cap off, if you would, and let's thank you,
There we
sir.
go. Hey, everybody. I had a little Mohs surgery, so that's what the Band-Aid is for, in case you're wondering. So, but all is well.
Good.
So,
Well, that's good news. We appreciate
yes.
you joining us tonight, and I'm sure it'll be an interesting presentation and meeting, and we look forward to some interaction as we move ahead. So without any further ado, Joe gave a brief overview, but I'd like you to just encapsulize your background and the high points and what you feel is important to this audience in your background, and what brings you here to this area of interest in exploration, and as well as your professional interest in it, which is quite extensive. So I'll turn it over to you and let you take off.
Sure. So, ever since I can remember, I always wanted to work in the film business. I really wanted to be an actor like everybody when I was in my teens. And as I graduated high school early, moved out of my parents' house at age 17, was working two jobs to support myself. One was at a film company. And so I started learning about all of that. That job led to the 4-year tenure on David Lynch's Dune, where I learned all about filmmaking and decided that's really, where I wanted to go. When the film ended, we also made Conan the Destroyer at the same time, by the way, both shooting at Studios Churubusco in Mexico City. Um, so when the film was over, the producer asked me what department did I like, and I said, I think I like the casting department. So she put me on her next film, which was Taipan, which ended up starring Brian Brown. And then from there, I went over to Spielberg's Amazing Stories for a season and a half, casting there as an associate, and then went back to the De Laurentiis family and started casting some of their films. Now, this went on when I turned 26. I had a major spiritual awakening. I never thought about anything out there in the great big universe. I never really thought about an extraterrestrial unless I saw them on TV and, thought, oh, this is great science fiction. Um, and so, but at age 26, once I had the spiritual awakening, everything sort of opened up. And then I started remembering things that happened in my childhood. Um, two incidences when I was 10. I woke up and I saw an angel in my bedroom. I thought it was one of my parents' spirit and thought that one of them had passed away, and I ran in and I remember putting my finger under their nose, and then I thought, oh, maybe it was my sister's, so I did the same. And then I just realized that, I had had this lovely experience. Back then, I could sense and see energies moving around in the room, like mirages. So I knew when something was there, and my whole body would ring with chills. And the other experience was I was sitting in the bathtub at 10 years old. All of a sudden, I was drawn to my image in the nozzle and where the water comes out. And all of a sudden, my entire spirit was pulled out of my body, brought into the middle of the universe, where the universe opened up. I went inside the universe, and all the questions we usually ask ourselves much later in life is, who am I? Where did I come from? What is this all about? What is the meaning of life? And all of that, all those questions went inside me. I came crashing back into my body, and then I just contemplated it for a little bit. Interestingly enough, I never ever discussed any of these things with my parents at all. I did with my mother later after I had this spiritual awakening, and I remembered these incidences. And the reason that I'm telling you this is because it does really coincide with my story. Um, when I was 12 years old, my mother informed me that my father was my stepfather, and that I had a biological father whose name was Fred Warner Vero, and that she didn't know that much about him, but she told me what she knew, and but I never ever once looked at my stepfather as anything but my father, because he was a great father to me. Of course, both my parents are gone. They've been gone for quite some time, and so my former literary agents back east, they decided to open up a little, not a little, but a publishing company that was married to MUFON and was married to Red Wheel Weiser Books. And they knew me from these books that I wrote, The Autobiography of an Extraterrestrial Saga. It's a 4-part book series. which can be seen on my website, autobiography of et.com. Sylvia Brown wrote the foreword to this one. And he called me and he said, he goes, look, I want you to write a book for MUFON. And he said, I have the title for it, The Extraterrestrial Species Almanac. And I went, oh, I could write that, because he knew that I had been studying contactee cases ever since I had that spiritual awakening when I was 26. I have gone on actual investigations with some MUFON investigators, also with the actual contactees. And on one of those trips, I actually caught one of the extraterrestrials on film. You can't see them there, but when you take pictures, it does come out. So that picture is in this book at the very back of the book. I put it in there. So while I'm writing this book, interestingly enough, I get a phone call from a woman up in Canada, and she tells me that she's my fourth or fifth cousin. She's a real genealogist. That's what she does for a living. And that we're related through my mother's father. And she wanted some info. I gave it to her. And I said, hey, by the way, do you think you could find my biological father? And she goes, oh, I can find anyone. Now, I had done my DNA testing, so I was already in the system, and she belonged to all the sites. So she was able to find him very easily. And she called me and she said, I'm so sorry to say that he passed away in 2006. This is 2019 when I'm writing the book, and that she called. And she said, I'm sorry to say he passed away, but he is buried at Forest Lawn across from Warner Brothers. And so I said, well, I'm going to go down there tomorrow and, talk to them at the front desk, which I did. And I said, do you guys have the name of a person who called when, to come pick up the body? And she looked, she said, we do. She gave me that man's name. He had a different last name than Fred's. Excuse me. I looked him up on the internet. Interestingly enough, he lived not but like 5 or 10 minutes away from me. I wrote him a letter. I stuck my picture in there, told him my story. A couple days later, I got a call from his son. And he said, my dad got your letter. And I said, oh, was your dad friends with Fred? And he said, no, he's actually his half brother. And I said, oh, wow. So you're like my cousin. And he goes, yeah, I guess so. He said, it's so strange. He said, normally we would just throw something like this away, but you're a doppelganger for Fred. So anyway, I said, well, let's just meet. I said, I just want you. I said, I don't even have pictures of him. I would love for you guys just to tell me everything about him. So my uncle, of course, is married. He has 3 sons from other marriages. This particular son is also in the film business. So I met with him and my newfound Uncle John. And we sat there for 3 hours. And the one thing I really remember from it was my Uncle John just going with a face like he just couldn't believe it. He was just stunned. And anyway, about an hour into the conversation, he says, well, we have the same mother, and he always wanted to go into the Air Force, but he wanted to go at least into the Air Guard when he was underage. So my mother signed the papers. He went into the Air Guard, and then they immediately put him in the Air Force. And then he told me all these places where he was stationed and all of that. And then next he says, oh, by the way, he was in Project Blue Book. And my face dropped. And I said, do you know what that is? He goes, well, kind of. He goes, my sons have always tried to get UFO information out of him, but he wouldn't budge. And anyway, long story short, I was able to obtain all his military records. and it does show that he was in intelligence. I know from doing this MUFON work and other stuff, higher ups in the military, and I showed him his discharge papers, and they said that the numbers that you're given when you're discharged are about who you were in the military, and they said they had never seen those numbers before, which I found quite interesting. But the similarities don't stop there. He said he became, I think, all the way up to a first sergeant, and then he just decided he didn't want to be in the military anymore. And I said, well, why is that? And he goes, I don't know. And I kind of thought, I wonder maybe if it was too much for him seeing the stuff that he might be seeing, right? And but we really don't know because he's no longer with us. But he said, well, when he came back, he ultimately joined IATSE and became the head of construction at Warner Brothers for their film and TV. And I worked it out when I was at Universal, he was at Warner Brothers, which those are studios are backed right up to one another. And uh, and after he was there for quite some time, he basically lived there on Warner Brothers property because he worked so much. They gave him a trailer to just sleep in. Ultimately, when he left there, he went and started his own scenic shop. He did a lot of stuff with the Hollywood Bowl, and then he did things for giant musicians, including Elton John, Neil Diamond, Michael Jackson, Alice Cooper, building and designing sets and things of that nature. Now, we all know when we have family members who might not be too keen on our interests in UFOs and other such things. Um, I didn't know if my newfound family would be, but they were. And I found out also that I had another half sister that I never met, and that we figured out that she had passed away, and that I had a stepbrother and two stepsisters who flew out to meet me, and they were all totally entrenched in the whole idea of it all. And so anyway, it just showed me that it was in the DNA, and that's why this is the path, that I chose. Because I tell you, once I woke up, I just couldn't gobble up the information fast enough. And the things I've captured on film are in both books, ET Almanac and UFO Hotspot. And the things that I've seen, the things I've heard officials tell me, that is out there that the public normally doesn't see. And so when I'm met with skepticism, I just smile. So, because we all know too, if any of you here, I am sure are experiencers. Dr. Bruce, I see you're in there. I know you are. We've talked a lot, and you're in the UFO hotspot with actor Billy McNamara. Um, so anyway, so that's my the ET Species Almanac now has sold over 30,000 copies for a niche book, which is amazing. The UFO Hotspot, I don't know how many copies, but it's been doing very well. And then sometime in the summer, I don't have a release date yet, but I've been working on the Extraterrestrial Species Almanac, the documentary, and it'll be released then. If anyone is going to Contact in the Desert, we're going to do the very first sneak peek there on Saturday, June 1st from 6:30 to 8 p.m. It's an hour and a half. Then we're going to do a panel. It'll be myself, JJ and Desiree Hertak, Paul Hynek, Yvonne Smith, Tanya Maidenford, who's another one of our producers, and whoever else might be there who's in the documentary as well. So anyway, so that's a little bit of a spiel. Sorry, I took up so much time, Bruce, but
No, not at all. That's certainly a lot to absorb. And thank you for being so detailed because, the important thing that I gather from that is you're unique in the fact that you came to this passion, this area of interest and pursuit, not only from personal experience, but also it's quite unusual in my knowledge of having, extended family that have tangential attachment to this that would
yeah.
lead you in that direction. So that is unique. And a couple, we could talk for hours about what AI is going to do to the film industry and so
Oh,
forth,
yeah.
but that's a separate topic. It's interesting. Your early experience leads one in the direction of what we have, and I don't know if the other folks on the meeting would agree or disagree, but Joe and I have talked about this, that there seems to be a crossover now of the silos that used to exist for, the 40 some years that I've been involved in this, of the nuts and bolts folks, versus the interdimensional possibilities, the multiverse, and so forth. And I think that, without putting words in your mouth, I think that your experience versus your work with the topic of tonight, Stranger at the Pentagon, would reinforce that possibility that maybe we're
Yeah.
crossing over and saying, well, maybe these aren't strict lines of demarcation between the nuts and bolts folks that are looking into the tangible evidence versus the folks that have the spiritual and or non, I would say, hard evidence type of experiences. Would you agree with that in
Yes.
your
Yes.
perspective?
Yeah.
If I may, I'd like to move now towards an interesting topic and one that's actually kind of close to Joe and I, and not to speak for him, but the stranger in the Pentagon and how you came about to get involved in that. Joe has some family history with High Bridge. I actually used to live in High Bridge, New Jersey for a number of years, so I used to drive by uh, that property on a daily basis, know where it is. And so if you could go through that, I know that you did a lot of follow-up research for your book in finding the gentleman who was the Army photographer who took the pictures, and the fact that the picture, correct me if I'm wrong, the picture that everybody assumes is Valiant Thor is actually not Valiant Thor. I think you identified that and confirmed that. But let me let you talk about your the trail you took to get to doing the film that you did on this.
Well, which you can see right behind me. So there's the movie poster here. This is the actual Victor 1. It's Valiant Thor's flagship, which is 300 feet in diameter. It holds 200 people. Here's upper deck, lower deck, and then this lists what all the rooms are. They're all listed here. All these posters, too, are on strangeratthepentagon.com, including Dr. Frank's How to Print Books. Now, I read the book in the 80s, right? And it really resonated with me, especially the picture of Valiant Thor, right? I put it away in a pocket, and then I've been casting for well over 30 years, we'll say. And my casting partner of 10 years, she's since passed. She told me of two friends that were very dear to her. They were very elderly at the time. They lived in Sun City in Arizona. And she said, you have to meet them. They see flying saucers all the time over their house. And I said, well, I'd love to meet them. And anyway, some months came by and she said, oh, they're finally coming into town. And the wife's name was Sherry. And she reminded me of Mrs. Santa Claus, honestly. She was a sweet lady with this white hair, and she had the sweetest little southern voice. And she said, Craig, we see these things. And she said, but, our friend, Dr. Frank. And I went, you mean strangers? She goes, yeah, you want to meet him? Just like that. And that's how I met Dr. Frank. Literally, those were the first words out of her mouth. And that's how I met him. I literally was sitting having lunch with him and his secretary the following Tuesday. And I thought it was going to be a fan lunch for me, right? Where this was like this one off. I, got a picture and, was going to go home and tell everybody I met Dr. Frank Strangers, who wrote the book. And anyway, we just, we literally instantly connected. And we talked in the beginning, like at least once a week. And then that just grew into getting together for lunch and then everything. And, he started to tell me his plight with trying to get this to the screen, which over the years had many hiccups, right? And anyway, I'm going to save a lot of the details because it's not going to matter.
What year? What year? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what year was that when you met him? Just
Well,
to put it in.
he passed in 2008 or 9.
I believe 8.
And I knew him for 7.5 years.
Okay, so it was around the 2000 timeframe there.
Yeah, around
okay,
the
just so I put it in
2010.
perspective of how
Yes.
recent this was.
Yeah. And anyway, so I told him, I said, Dr. Frank, your book is vignettes of story. There's really not a story there to do it. And, I said, look, I'll prove it to you. So I wrote everything out and I gave it to him. And then he just started talking to me more and more and more and more. And, and then he wanted me to get involved. And I was really busy with other stuff. And I kind of begrudgingly did it at first. And I'm so glad that I did because, it's just grown into something so great. So I would go and I would sit with him several times a week for a year or two and just let him tell me every story he could remember. Go with the first time he went on their ship, who did he meet, what were the conversations, what did he feel, everything that could that would come out of him, and I never knew what was going to come out of him. So anyway, I did that and I just started assembling everything, and I did up a script. And then after that first draft was done, I gave it to him. He said that he gave it to Valiant. Well, Valiant came to his office. He would come to his office early in the morning before his secretary came, he always said. And he said that he held the script and that he said that he absorbs it. And I said, do you have any notes? And he goes, yes, I wrote notes in the script you gave me. And Valiant said, nice job. And I said, that's it? Nice job? No notes? And he said, no. Right. And I just thought that was really odd. Well, I came home and that night I went to sleep and I woke up in the morning and all the notes were floating around my head like the rings of Saturn. It was such an urgency for me to get to my computer and channel them all out. Right. And this is how the process went. Go ahead. You have a question?
Just to follow up on that. So are you still in touch with Valiant? I know that you said in other interviews that you've done that he's still visiting. He hasn't left
Yes.
totally. But so That's fascinating. So basically, you got his acquiescence on the content of the movie before you.
Exactly, on the content
Wow.
of the movie. And he has four vice commanders, and how it works with them also when I'm writing, not only Stranger, but the other things that I'm writing. One of his vice commanders was with me um, 10 years before I met Dr. Frank. I just knew what she looked like. I didn't know her name because she would come to me when I meditate. Once I woke up in meditation, uh, I would start to see beings from elsewhere, primarily human, but they would be in these suits that that are from that we deem outer space body suits, standing in front of a ship or something like that. And this woman came to me and she was smiling. I just never forgot her, right? She was so that, and she's one of Valiant's vice commanders named Teal. And she actually is a teacher. She teaches, she teaches people from other planets about our duality on Earth, and she brings people up who are open to learning about other races. She brings them up astrally in their sleep and teaches them about the universal races that are out there. Now, I remember being in some of those, and Dr. Frank was telling me that she was saying that I was going, and I said, "Yes, I know I'm going because I remember being there and what I saw." Right? So, by the way, she does that for people who are open to it. So, if anybody here in your group, if you just take your mind, catapult it to Victor 1 at Lake Mead, that's all you have to do, and say, Vice Commander Teal, I would love to be a part of your night classes if you will so have me. And then, keep saying it and also say, and I would like to remember, right? I would like to remember, and you will eventually remember. So now this has happened with a lot of my friends that have done it. I will tell you a very interesting story about Teal. Several years after I met Dr. Frank, um, I had a stomach ache really bad and I was bedridden. I thought it would just pass. The next day it got worse. The third day I was in so much pain. I called my best friend. She came and picked me up and she took me to the doctor. They tried to figure out what it was. They tried to induce stuff in my stomach. Nothing would happen. They put me in an ambulance, took me to the hospital. They did x-rays. They said that I had a bowel obstruction and they were going to have to operate on me first thing in the morning. So she left me there that night, maybe somewhere around 9 o'clock. And I remember going to sleep. And during the night, I know what teal looks like, right? And I knew that it was teal at this point because it was confirmed by Dr. Frank. I felt her standing over me with her hand over my abdomen. And all of a sudden, I felt thousands of tiny little bubbles going through my intestines. And I knew when I woke up in the morning, I would be fine. Right. And then I went back to sleep. But when I opened my eyes in the morning, sitting next to my bed was Dr. Frank. And I went, "What are you doing here? How did you know?" And he goes, "Oh, Teal called me early this morning, told me to get down here and tell you she fixed you up last night."
Wow.
And that, like, my whole body is still ringing with chills. And they did. I told them in the morning, I said, "I feel so much better. Please take another x-ray. You'll see that whatever it was has passed." It did. And I walked out of there that afternoon. So that was one of my, my lovely experiences. But I'll tell you how it is so in telepathy. Now this is when I'm writing, I see it, right? I see it, I hear it, they spell it if I don't know what it is, um, and I can feel it. So when one of them is telling me, is guiding me, it's kind of almost like they sit in my body. They don't possess my body. They sit in it and they share their feeling body with me. So I am feeling all the feelings they felt as I'm writing from their own perspective. And they told me this is how telepathy is up there in their world. So when they're talking to you, it's not just mind to mind, it's feeling body to feeling body, right? And when this feeling hits you, it's that experience that they gleaned from that experience that has raised their spiritual sustenance. But because you're experiencing it, you get a little bit of spiritual elevation too.
So if I may, kind of to paraphrase what you're saying, so the benefit to them, the reason they're here, now if we go back to the time that Valiant spent in the Pentagon trying to say, look, here's the quid pro quo. We'd like to propose this, of course, because of all the failings of human, as I understand it from the book and from the movie. But now we're not interested in that. We still want to sell the umbrellas, even though you got a better one that won't turn over in the wind, kind of a thing. They were turned down with the offer of, is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. He was given put on a VIP status, which was arranged already. They knew he was coming, by the way. It wasn't that he just landed and they went and picked him up. It was, some Nordics came and went to a military base and told them, and then they were alerted. So when Valiant came, they were expecting him. Everyone, it was a Saturday morning. They all were in the Oval Office, including the Joint Chiefs and other powers that be. And the first night, Valiant spent it in, I think, an Army office on a cot until they had his Pentagon quarters done. It was 3 stories down, Dr. Frank told me. I met other generals who were there during that time that Dr. Frank was friends with, who were retired, and they told me all about, the underground there, and the underground train that goes from the Pentagon to the White House and things like that. And they provided his wardrobe, they provided all of that, and if you notice, those suits look black, but they're really blue. And he never wore a black tie. He always wore a white tie.
Yeah. So the fact that this is not a closed-ended story, that these entities are still amongst us, if you will.
Yes.
Are you privileged to their take on what's going on, or where they are, or where is the process continuing in terms of their their agenda to help us in some way to protect us? And what do you, how often do you interact with them? How up to date are you on what the status in their view of what's going on this planet is? I mean, to me, that's fascinating to say, all right, what do they see now compared to 1977 or something? And I can't believe they think we're doing better than we were in the past. But what do you have a sense of that? Do they share that with you? And are you able to ask those questions?
I actually don't want to know those questions. So I don't ask those
don't
questions.
Blame you there.
I really don't want to know those things, honestly. Really, my job coming here is just to be a writer and to bring forth the information from out there here. And that's part of raising consciousness. It's part of the consciousness raising programs, that they have an effect through star seeds, through, indigo children and crystals and all of that. I mean, the kids that I've been meeting today who have who have been born from generation to generation in starseed families are like brainiacs. I mean, some kids are already speaking 5-star languages and their parents don't know how.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I once got an EVP of a woman speaking in uh, uh, perfect voice, like we're talking now, in some other language. I had given it to everybody, language experts, and everybody said they didn't know what it was. I gave it to the kid, and he goes, "Oh, that's Pleiadian. They're telling you that they built a base around the corner from your house."
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
If I may
Joe,
just jump
go
in
ahead,
for
Joe.
a second here.
Sure.
Craig, you mentioned earlier that Teal was a teacher and that she taught in
Mm-hmm.
multiple dimensions, I guess you would say.
Yes.
But she was also teaching humans about the alien cultures, as well
Yes.
as the alien cultures that are also visiting. In one of your books, I think you mentioned that there were 57 different species, or there was a number. You had a number.
Well, in the extraterrestrial species almanac, I mean, I had accumulated and stopped at 120, but I had that per the publisher, I had to keep the book under 300 pages. And I remembered hearing Paul Hellyer give a talk, and he said he knew of 82 races visiting Earth. And I thought, well, let me see if I can honor Mr. Hellyer and see if I can squeeze in 82 races. And I did. So that's why there's 82 races.
Okay, now as a follow-up to that, you also mentioned Teal. You kind of you haven't really given a description of her. Do you have pictures of her, or can you give a pretty much detailed
Sure.
description?
I can, yeah. She's about 5'7". Um, she would have the Rubenesque body, like, like we would see in yesteryear. When I saw her, she was wearing a powder blue uniform. She has shoulder length red hair. Um, she has green eyes and porcelain skin.
Okay,
And she is um, completely gregarious, but is also can fly the ships. Like Dr. Frank says, she can fly those ships better than the guys can. So she's a master in most areas. What's interesting is, just to give you guys an idea, this is Nelfa. Nelfa is a clarion, and I have the clarion species in the ET Species Almanac. Actually, the contactee for the clarions is in the documentary. Now, Nelfa deals with astrobiology and chronoastronomy. So she actually works between the dimensions and making sure of its equilibrium and many other things. So there's all these things that are really starting to come out. That's just going to be so fascinating. A lot of it, he goes into what a lot of the clarions do, but Teal, for instance, is she's very, very special to me. She worked with me on she was one of the mentors on the autobiography of an extraterrestrial saga books.
oh, okay. Thanks, Craig. Very
You're
interesting.
welcome.
Go
Couple
ahead,
quick
Bruce.
yeah, good. Thank you, Joe. Thanks for jumping in with those excellent questions. A real quick question. Did you take that photo or where?
No, that was taken by Maurizio Cavallo, who is an Italian man who doesn't speak a lick of English. And he lives in a very remote town. I had my European producers fly there, get an interpreter, and go and film him for 3 days. So we have a really wonderful section of him talking about the various beings and us showing pictures of what those beings
Amazing.
look like.
That's
Yeah,
amazing. Quick
yeah.
question. Of all these species, if you will, or these various organizations that are, Are they all do you know? And I'm going to ask you questions you may not have an answer to, but are they cooperative? Do they all work together? Do they have different agendas? Are there some that aren't, they're not in it for the best of purposes, the most altruistic reasons? What's your take on that? What do you understand?
They're how it's explained to me is that they're all a part of what they call the galactarian alignment of space peoples and planets. So it's for the betterment of all universal kind.
Okay.
Right. So for instance, like the Alpha Centaurians, who are Nordics as well, they're only coming here as planetary instructors, helping people differently. They're like I know of at least five people in South America that have been contacted. I used what's his name, Ricardo Gonzalez, for the Alpha Centaurians in the book, and then Sixto Paz Wells for the documentary. He's on camera. He's been on their ships over 100 times.
Wow.
Yeah. So he has a lot to say about the Alpha Centaurians. Now, they primarily go to South America because they're helping the poor regions. Those people don't have medicine. If their crops don't grow, they can't eat. So they really come and they assist them, and to them, they're just their brothers from the sky.
Let me ask you this.
Let me
Yeah,
follow, if I may. Thanks.
Sure.
The Alpha Centauri. Now, I operate a radio telescope, just as a docent. But
Right.
the interesting thing about it is we're up to about 4,000 exoplanets right now. One of the closest star systems that to the Earth is unfortunately in the southern hemisphere, so we don't get to see a lot of it. I believe it's Alpha Centauri, though, and I think it is only about 4 light years away. Does proximity to the stars, especially since there's anywhere from 57 to several hundred species that we're talking about, how does that fit into the overall scheme?
I don't know. I don't really understand the question because
okay, let me clarify it then. Basically, the fact that every day we're creating a larger constellation of known exoplanets outside of our solar system. 4,000 is the number. But you mentioned Alpha Centauri, and that kind of
right
rang the bell for me a little bit, because the proximity to good old Sol is only about 4 light years away. And I was just wondering whether or not the proximity of a star system that has one of these intelligent species that is visiting us, as opposed to 400,000 light years away, which is looking at the scale of things.
Yeah. Well, I think planets that are closer, people have been visiting here a lot more often. Some live here. Some of them walk among us. But distance isn't a problem with their thought ships. What they do is they just they take their coordinates from where they are. They put the coordinates into the ship of where they want to go, and they're not even bending space at that time. They're just going from one place to another. There are ships that go through the inner space continuums or the star lanes inside. Those ships, are traveling. What they do is they travel on a beam of light through there, and then they pop out. So there are different ships that are made for different kinds of travel. So distance isn't a problem for races that are farther away too.
If I could follow up on one thing you said, and it's interesting because now, have you been on the ship? Have you were you able to go on the Victor 1 or no?
Well, I've been in there, like I remember being on there during the time of writing the script, but I'm sure it was an astral experience,
Okay,
right?
not a
It's not a
physical.
physical one.
Okay.
Yeah, like I've always been very honest. I said, I, like everyone else, would love to meet Valiant Thor and his vice commanders, right? I would love it. But my experience with them is telepathic,
Right.
is feeling, and all of a sudden, if they want to say something to me, they'll just say it in my head and I'll get it. But they're always with me. They're part of the team. Also when I'm writing, there's another vice commander now. Teal has handed the off to Vice Commander Dawn, who's been working with me on a couple of the latest books, and then she pops in every once in a while. Um, I would say Teal is the one that brought me up to speed to learn what it's like to be a fully conscious being.
Can I take you back to, and perhaps I misunderstood, but you mentioned when you were saying that if we were interested in trying to get involved in this, that, if I understood, Teal's based out of Lake Mead, and
Yeah, that's where the ship is. The ship is parked there. Like there
there's
are
no water in
all
Lake Mead anymore. It's like
there
38%. No, I'm
isn't
just
there
kidding. No.
isn't the actual in either UFO hotspot
Right.
or Stranger at the Pentagon, the coordinates to where it is there. I've actually gone to the coordinates
Wow.
on the actual day that he arrived, March 16th. It wasn't that I planned it that way.
Just happened
Well,
to work.
we were driving out there and I went, oh my God, today's March 16th and we're going out there. It's not that you will see it,
No.
right? Because they can bleep themselves into the next dimension, but their screens will show this dimension,
I
right?
see. I
And
see.
they can hear also in this dimension. Dr. Frank used to explain when they would come and pick him up from the hotel in Vegas and bring him to the ship, that what they had was a very shield. So when the car would drive towards the ship, this very shield would come out this way and block every view. And then it would just disappear and it goes down into the hole where they park all their vehicles. They have cars, boats,
Wow.
motorcycles, um, all those kinds of things in the bottom of the ship because they have to get around.
If I may, can I transition to something else that I'd like to
Yes.
ask you to talk about? And that is, I know you are familiar and have spoken positively about Sedona and the vortex and so forth. Could you talk about the correlation between what happens in Sedona in your mind and what technologies, and are they different technologies that are used uh, during the procedure that you just elaborated on? I mean, is it the same type of technology to your knowledge, or is it totally different? Passing through a vortex and having that ability to transverse time and or space.
Well, I think there's different types of vortexes. I mean, the
Hmm.
very first time I went to Sedona was for the harmonic convergence back in '87, I believe.
Yeah.
It was in August, and I pretty much hung out on Bell Rock, and I was just boosted with so much energy, and I love that place. The minute I got out of the vicinity, heading back to the airport out of Sedona's energy, all of a sudden I felt like I was a glowing rod of light. And my energy was so high that on the way home, I started having visions
Wow.
of other worlds and other lands, like boom, 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 like this. It was really, really quite amazing. So I've gone back there at least once a year, every year, sometimes a couple. Um, in UFO hotspots, once I was driving towards Bell Rock to go there to meditate, and an orb like this big, silver orb, is going right along the side of the road like this, coming towards me. And I couldn't believe it. And I grabbed my phone and I snapped off a couple of shots. So I put that in the Sedona section in
Right.
hotspots. Um, Also, when you go to Sedona, you have to have night vision binoculars. If you have night vision binoculars, you're going to see them way up in the sky, right? And
Yeah.
they do come out a lot at night. So you will see a lot of them. I've also put in there, as I have for a lot of these other great hotspots, like the person you call who will take you out on these night things, who has like 9 pair of night
Series
vision
2, right?
binocular.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And chairs, and points them out and does all of that. Also, this person can take you out to the Bradshaw Ranch,
Wow.
which is
A hotspot.
the most interdimensional hotspot I have ever been in my entire life. Um, Interestingly enough, I heard about the Bradshaw Ranch through a woman who was in Dr. Frank's group, because she lives in Sedona, and she told me when it was a working ranch, she worked there. So she was telling me all these stories about the ranch, right? And so once I was there, and I said, well, can you take me to the ranch? She goes, well, we can only drive so far, and then we're going to have to walk for like 40 minutes, because you have to have a 4-wheel drive to get back there. So we did that, and as we're walking, and this is in daylight, because I would never do it at night, right? Like I told you, I have, I guess people call it the spidey sense, and I'm walking, you have to walk down this wash, and there's just bushes everywhere. And I literally could feel the dimensions opening, and just feeling all these
Wow.
eyes on me. And all I wanted to do was turn around and run. But I had an almost 80-year-old woman in front of me going, come on, Craig, let's go. And I'm like, oh man, I can't chicken out. So, we got to the ranch, and she was pointing everything out and all of that. And that's when it was owned by the government,
Right.
right? And then I went again when it was no longer, the government had gifted it back to Arizona,
Mhm.
and the forestry service.
Right.
And so it was interesting to see it in a different light. But also last year, when I was at Contact in the Desert, I had a couple come up to me, and they told me they were from Sedona, and that they go to the ranch all the time, and they stay overnight, and that they had captured mantis being on camera. They showed me pictures. They hear the Bigfoot howls at night, because, Linda Bradshaw talked to
Okay.
Big Girl when she was there, the albino, who
Mhm.
actually at some point had a baby. And so
Oh,
she
wow.
saw both the footprints. She said when Big Girl was pregnant, she laid in the dirt where she used to feed her by the corrals. She would put food on a plate, and she laid in the dirt to show her belly, so that Linda knew that
Knew
she
that
was
she was
pregnant.
pregnant.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But Big Girl also protected her mare, who was pregnant, because either Greys or reptilians, and Tom Dongo, who lives there, wasn't sure, called Linda to say that the other ranches, that their mares' fetuses were being taken by
Taken. Right.
Greys or
Right.
reptilians. Um, Now her son was abducted when he went, that they
Mhm.
own acres and acres. He was abducted when he took a long stretch out there. Another night, he was with his girlfriend. They were staying in the Homestead House, which is the oldest house in Sedona. Um, and Greys landed and were running around the property, and they saw them. Could you imagine that? You're in the middle of nowhere, right? That
Yeah.
ranch is in the middle of
Huge.
nowhere. I'm
Yeah.
not, have you been there, Bruce?
Yes. Yeah. Many
Okay,
years
good.
ago.
So
Many
you
years
know.
ago. Yes.
So it's
It's
at night. It's frightening.
well everywhere in the Southwest is
Yeah,
pretty big. Large open spaces that it's kind of hard for,
that's right.
people from New York City to understand
That's
the
right.
vastness of it. Can I ask you maybe the $64,000 question? And then I want to let some of the folks that are with us ask questions. But do you know, and I'm asking you questions because you've got the conduit. The rest of us don't. And you know, spent most of my adult life, as well as many of the folks here, investigating this. Who are we connected to? Did you know that? I mean, who are we a standalone bunch of losers trying to kill ourselves, or who are our
Yeah.
ancestors? Are we indeed a colony here, or were they colonized, or which a lot of historical religions and so forth, and history itself kind of, in my mind, lead you to that conclusion. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. What's your take on that?
Well, my take on that is extraterrestrials have been visiting and living on Earth well before our current civilization, even going back 100, 200 years. We do know that extraterrestrials were visiting all the ancient cultures.
Yes.
They put it in writing in their pyramids, the Aztecs and that culture. It's in, I mean, the amount of things that they put on rocks and stones and carving out spaceships. And I mean, one of my buddies who's in the documentary bought a bunch of them, had them carbon tested, the way back that they are from that civilization. One is like a spaceship this big with all these designs on it, and you open it up and the little gray man is sitting inside. I mean, these things, you can't refute. So here is the to me, the truth. And others that I've talked to, um, uh, they have been leaving their DNA on this planet forever, as long as it's been going. So I I I love to say that when we do 23andMe or MyHeritage, it tells us what countries we're from. And one day we'll be able to do it, and it'll tell us what star systems we're from.
Yeah.
Well stated.
Right?
Well
Yeah.
stated. Yeah. I mean, because
Yeah.
there's not a person that's ever lived that hasn't said what you said. Hey,
Yeah.
why the hell are we here? What are we about? What is this all about? And so thank you. Joe,
Yeah.
you were
Okay.
going to say
Yeah,
something?
if I may, the whole thing about portals. What's your thought on Skinwalker Ranch? Because it's ample evidence that there's something going on there that seems to fit the model of what a portal should be, or how it should work, at least at one level.
Well, I think, in my opinion, not that I have visited it, but I sure love watching that TV show, as we all do. Um, Bradshaw Ranch portals and interdimensional is way off the charts, even more than Skinwalker Ranch, right? It goes through the ripples, right? Let me see if I have the story. Oh, I do right here. All right. So as Linda's son is coming home driving in the four-wheeler with a buddy of his in the middle of the night back to the ranch, going through that wash I told you about, um, all of a sudden walking out from one side of the road across, and it stopped in the middle and looked at them. It was a creature on all fours with a shoulder height of approximately 4 feet. The animal appeared to be a cross between a cat and a horse. The head resembled a cat's. It was very large with definite cat eyes, cat ears, and a cat mouth, but turned down. Yet it had very long hairs all over its face. The legs were extremely long, and the back appeared to be humped. The tail was similar to a horse's tail, and the body hair hung almost to the ground. It stood in the road for a moment, glaring at them, and then it turned and it walked off into the night. Now, here's the interesting thing is, did it go from one portal to another portal? Because that same night, the same animal was seen in another state who reported the exact same thing. So is it going from portal to portal, like what we know? I'm friends with Ronnie LeBlanc from Bigfoot Expedition. So I get to talk to him about Bigfoots and all of that. And we know when you see those lights, they go, we know that they're traveling, right? They're going from one place to another, and that kind of thing. So,
Well, well,
it
basically, if I just jump in for a second, it seems to me because we have sightings here, even in New Jersey, of
yeah.
Bigfoot, and of course, also we have photographs that were taken near a nuclear power plant that even shows what looks like a portal above it.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, I mean, so I guess what I'm getting at is there is probably multiple uh, portals and
There
those
are.
things that we can't explain all over the world.
Well, most portals are due to iron ore in the rock, which is combined with quartz crystal, right? That's why Sedona is a very big place. That's why um, Giant Rock and the Integratron. I mean, George built the Integratron on the actual place that Salganda told him to build it because it had a big giant cache of quartz crystal underneath the ground.
Yeah, you
So
visited. I've read your discussions about the Integratron
yeah,
and how unique and how fascinating and how active
uh,
it is. Could you just spend a couple minutes talking to us about your experience and your
yes,
understanding of that, please?
absolutely. Well, the first time I went out there to visit it, I've heard about it for many years and all these people's experiences, and then Dr. Frank and I got a call from them, and they were going to do a retro UFO convention because George Van Tassel, way back in the
Fantastic.
50s, started doing the space conventions,
Right.
UFO space conventions, to raise money for the to build the Integratron.
Yeah, right.
Right, exactly. And so, and what I didn't know is Dr. Frank used to MC those events,
Oh, mhm.
right? See, I
No,
didn't even know that.
no.
And so they asked us to be a part of it. So they said, we're going to close the Integratron down for a day, come out. And we sat up on the second floor. And, Dr. Frank just told us, everything about those times. I was also very lucky. I also know Bob Short, who recently passed, who
Passed
was
away.
there from the very beginning, and also my friend Athena, who was still alive, who was there with Bob Short and George underneath the rock when George began channeling, and she was there the first time he channeled Ashtar,
Wow.
right? He was the very first person to channel Ashtar. So I got all of this straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Athena is a bevy of information, and she's actually in the documentary as well. And but not talking about that, talking about other things that she's well versed on. But so Giant Rock is a sacred rock, and it's had many UFO sightings. George went out there to have a more spiritual life, right? The he knew the original guy who ran the airport, who
Right.
blew out under the rock and all of that. That whole story is in the book. I'm not going to bore
Fascinating.
everyone. It's great. And then, so he lived out there with his family, and he would sleep on a cot out in the desert because it was hot. And one night, he woke up and he saw a man approaching, and he went over and he met him. And then he saw, he looked a little different, was wearing
Right.
a spacesuit, and introduced himself as Salganda. And he was 5'6", short blonde hair. And then he looked beyond him and saw his ship, and he asked George if he would like to see it. And of course, George is fascinated with flying. He worked for Howard Hughes,
Hughes.
McDonnell
Right.
Douglas. In fact, Howard Hughes gave him $20,000 to start the Integratron.
Didn't know that.
exactly. And he used to fly in his airplane so he could eat Eva, George's wife's burgers and apple pie and just hang out in that little diner in the middle of nowhere, right? So anyway, there's so many great stories about there, but I will tell everyone, if you want to feel, originally it was created to rejuvenate your cells. That's how they stay young, and that's their fountain of youth, and that's how they have a very long longevity in their lives, thousands of years. Valiant Thor came with that same proposal. He told them how to do it from but they didn't. But a different being went to, this is before Valiant Thor came. It was 53, I believe. And George took it upon himself to do it. And they could get 10,000 people through it a day. And when it was 95% done, Salganda said, you're not going to be allowed to turn it on because the people aren't ready yet. And then George passed away, and then everything disappeared, and then it went into ruins, and then somebody bought it, and it stayed in ruins, and then the sisters ended up buying it. They refurbished it, and they have it going. So the thing is that the sound chamber on the second floor is the most amazing thing. And when they do the singing bowls, you feel like you're levitating when you're laying on the mats and that kind of thing. I was lucky enough. Many people go there to record their albums. Moby did an album there. Moby sang there before. But the actual Gregorian chanters from Italy were there when I was there. Wow. And they came in and they did chanting inside the actual dome. And it just like my body's just ringing with chills because it's like all the sounds are floating. They're all over. It's an experience. You can't, do that. So make sure that if you do go to their website, or, if you have the book, it tells you everything in UFO hotspots, because you have to make a reservation. If you don't have a reservation, you won't be able to go on the property, right? And if you go, you want to go in a car that that you can drive through dirt to at least go out to Giant Rock, which is only, I think, a short mile away. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Joe, do we have time to go ahead and open it up to
I was
some
going
of
to
our
say
guests?
we got a couple of raised hands. Sophia Grickus and also Robert Morningstar. Hey,
all right,
Robert.
Sophia.
Hey,
Sophia.
Ladies first.
Hi, Robert.
Do we want to let
Bruce Cordet? Hi, Bruce.
Let's let Sophia go first, and then we'll go to Robert, and then Bruce. Go ahead, Sophia.
Hi there. One of the experiences that I had one of my times at the Integratron was, even without the singing bowls, if you stand up on the second floor in the center, there's, I don't know, a 2-foot opening.
Yeah.
And I think energetically, the energetic axis goes up through there. And I experienced just totally dematerializing. Like you were talking before, you used the expression about your cells bubbling up.
Yes.
And I think that that's what happened for me there. And in that, you just totally get rejuvenated. Every single cell gets cleared.
I think it's about this big, right?
What's
it's
that
something
big?
That the hole, and then they have something over it. So if you remove the board, that goes all the way down to where the crystals are, way in the ground. So if you stand over it, just like Sophia was saying, you're plugged in, but your body will start doing this. And it's good to stay there and just wait till it equalizes, because then you've gotten all that energy. And everyone experiences something. And also, if you go, oh, or just do any noise, it goes all the way down and it comes up and it just makes this big expansion of noise. Yeah, that's great. I'm so glad you had that experience. That's cool.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I think Robert Morningstar, you got your hand up. Go ahead, Robert. Unmute.
There you go. Unmute, Robert.
Okay, let's.
Hi, hi,
There
hi,
we go. Okay.
hi, fellas. Hi, Craig. Good to meet you. I have a couple of questions. First, you familiar with the movie Stranger from Venus?
Do you know, I think I saw it a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's based on Valiant Thor. It's set in England, but it's a very interesting story. One of the questions I've had for many years, as you may know, I was editor and publisher of UFO Digest. A couple of years ago, I started asking the question, what happened to the Venusians? After 1969, you could talk about Martians and mantids and anything else, but no Venusians. And I thought that was an interesting phenomenon, and almost as if it was a forbidden topic. I spoke with Robert Potter of that Mount Shasta group,
Mm-hmm.
um, and they have a very interesting story of contact with Venusians since 1952. I was wondering if you were going to be at their conference in July.
I'm not. Unfortunately, it's just so far for me to travel. But I know that Ray Keller is
Yes, Ray
very
Keller. Yeah.
much. Yeah, Ray, I've talked to a lot. I just adore that guy. He's
Yeah.
very well versed on a lot of the Venusian material. Has some great books on it that he sent me, and we've shared information back and forth. So.
I'm planning to
Yeah.
interview him. Perhaps we could have you both on my show sometime. I'd love to
Yeah,
interview you
absolutely.
about
Absolutely.
Stranger in the Pentagon and Doctor Strange. It's
Yeah,
a fascinating
absolutely.
story. And I've actually seen the really high quality pictures, colored pictures of Valiant Thor when he met with Nixon and Eisenhower. Very impressive, very impressive person.
Yeah, yeah. I mean the pictures that are out there are the ones that were taken in Howard Menger's backyard,
Mm-hmm.
right?
No,
So
actually, these were apparently these are the White House pictures. But
you're
there's
kidding.
another interesting fellow, Howard Menzer, and his
Yeah,
contact with the Venusians, which is the mystery to me because throughout the 1950s and 60s, a majority of the contactees were saying that they had been contacted by benevolent extraterrestrials who were
right.
humanoid and uh, Venusian. And then all of a sudden, the Venusian presence disappeared. There's
Well, they
also
they came in drones in the 50s. There were lots of them coming, all with the same message. Um, Dr. Frank actually connected me to Connie Menger. I wasn't able to speak to Howard because at the time he was already in advanced Alzheimer's. So I
yeah,
so I was able to talk to Connie several times, and I was allowed to go visit her in Vero Beach when she was 95. Kindly, her son and daughter allowed me to come and visit with her with some other friends. And so that was great. I have great pictures with Connie and that kind of thing. She wasn't there the day that the pictures were taken. She was a part of the group. He was still married to Rose Menger at the time. And so those kids running around are theirs.
I have seen the 8
Oh,
millimeter movie or 16 millimeter movie that was taken at that house outside Washington.
You have? I would
Yeah,
love to see that. How do I get to see that?
I actually saw it on YouTube. I'll see if I can track it down for you.
Oh, would you? And
Yeah,
and
sure,
email it to me?
sure.
Yeah, my
I'll
my
try.
email's easy, craigcampobasso@gmail for
Okay,
everybody. That and
good.
if you have that picture of Valiant Thor and the president and vice president, I'd love to see that too, because I didn't
Okay,
even know that existed.
I'll see if I can
oh,
find it. It's in a crash drive, but I've been recovering it little by little over a period.
Awesome.
okay. Thanks, Robert.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Welcome.
Next up is Bruce Cornett. Go ahead, Bruce.
Where are you, Bruce?
Bruce, are you there? Have to unmute. Okay, well, while we're waiting for Bruce to get back on, Nick Curto, go ahead. You have your hand up. Unmute
Okay,
yourself.
thank you so much. What an exciting hour this has been. Oh my God, unbelievable. Really? Wow. I'm just incredibly impressed with the data that's being said here. Two quick questions. On Amazon, they have um, authored books saying it's Val Thor. Is it Val Thor? No.
No. I will tell you how that happened. Um, Back in those days, Gray Barker had a thing called Saucerian Press, right? All of those books are from Saucerian Press. And when the short film came out, I wasn't going to release a short film. I only made it for investors to see, but everyone begged me. So really, it's only scenes from the movie that I sort of sewed together with a little, what happens at the ending. And uh, so all of a sudden, all these books started showing up with Valiant Thor's name on it. People were calling me saying, "Oh, I just read this book by Valiant Thor." And I said, "Valiant Thor never wrote a book, never wrote a book." So do you think Valiant Thor is going to come down here and put it, write some books and then stick them on Amazon? No.
Right, right. I kind of thought that, but still, it just seems as though to get away with that is really criminal to put that out there like that.
It is criminal because it's not correct. It's not to say that the information isn't good, right? But it's whoever originally wrote those books, right? And I believe that some of those books are owned by AB Books, and somebody told me AB Books are owned by Amazon.
Ah,
So yeah, like a lot of things just buy everything up and then they just sort of repurpose them. So
right, right. And one last question, please. Are they going to have the weekend coming up on High Bridge this coming summer? Is that going to happen?
I don't know. That's a Joe question.
No, don't think
That,
so.
well, they haven't reached out for us. They reached out to
No.
some other people, but I don't think they're
Oh,
going to be
maybe it
able to
is.
pull it off very easily.
Okay.
It's government related, so you
Ah,
have to go through a lot of hoops. You
oh
have to
Mm,
jump
boy.
through a lot of hoops.
yeah,
Yeah,
Craig, thank you so much.
you're
yeah.
welcome.
Thank you, Nick. Okay, I see Bruce Cordet is back on, and are you on unmute,
You got a
Bruce?
picture. There he is. Okay. No, you just muted, Bruce. Unmute. Bruce, unmute. You muted yourself. And there we
Okay,
go.
now you're
Okay.
now okay. Now
There you
you're
go.
Oh,
Bruce. Can we hear? We can't hear you.
You're gonna have to select another mic. It's not coming through, Bruce.
Okay,
telepathy, Bruce.
we'll go back to
Telepathy.
Bruce in a second. Let's go to okay, Sophia. It's go ahead and unmute.
When you guys are talking about, what's happened to the Venusian presence, if you go up to the High Bridge area, especially over by the Menger farm, um, I believe from what I heard, what they were telling me, there was actually tubes, transport tubes that were directly going back and forth between there and Venus, and they were able to just travel that way. And there is a huge joint military ET base there in that area that goes from High Bridge north up to Glen Gardner.
Uh,
Um,
used to
and
live there. Haven't heard that. Who have you heard
Well, they
that
have
from? Or
the
you haven't?
VA. They have the
I've been
VA
there.
facility. Part of it's a VA
Yes,
facility.
it's in the mountain under the VA
Under the
facility.
Hagedorn facility in Glen
Precisely.
Gardner?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they had the joint military base had entrapped a lot of the Venusians that were there around Menger's farm. And the Galactic Federation came in last summer and was able to get them all released probably this past December. And there are still some of the Venusians that are working on joint missions, joint projects that elected to stay, but there's still a very strong active presence up there.
Yeah, just because we're not hearing about them doesn't mean that they're not here. Also, you know, if everybody thinks about it, another why we age is because we're living on the outside of a planet. We're getting bombarded by all kinds of rays and everything, and this is what ages us. And so what they do is they create environments in their crafts and on the interior of ships. They can create what we call synchrotron skies. So if you're on the interior of Venus, it could be floored out. I don't know how many floors on Mars, on any of all the planets. They can be terraced out. Each floor could be, housing, apartments, farmland, animals, everything. They can create all of that because you have to remember they're fully conscious and they're being overseen by created beings, which what we would call our angelics, which is like what Valiant Thor has. So they have the God molecule, as we would call it, and so that's how they live, and they have the resonation fields that just keeps them looking at like they do and all of that. And creative beings live forever, right? There's great stories about them. If after 10-20,000 years they're tired of being who they are, they can shift and become something else. There's another gentleman when I came out with the Valiant Thor story who called me. He's a elderly gentleman. He told me when he was young and that he was 17. He often wondered about the beings that were out there in the universe, and then after some time he looked up into the sky and he would start seeing silver saucers glinting up with the sun. And then one day, again, no lie, a 5'6" gentleman with short blonde hair, just like Solganda, right, approached him and said, "We've been listening to your thoughts, and I'm here to answer all your questions." And so this man had access to him for over 40 sessions in a period of 7 months. And at a certain point, he said, "I am a created being, and I created this body because it's the one that you would most accept." So, yeah, isn't that cool?
May I follow up on that with a
Yes.
what is your understanding, or what have you learned with reference to that? The purpose, how does this contextually work with the abductions, and what is the purpose of that? It's not generally a positive, necessarily a positive experience, or from the folks that have been interviewed, and although there have been very positive episodes of it. So how does that work? I mean, how does that fit in with the agenda, the mandate, or why these folks are visiting us, to use it?
Well, creative beings are here overseeing. It's like Valiant Thor said, he is here, he is overseeing this sector, right? He is in charge of that, but he is here to oversee the ascension process for Earth. So he's not going to be leaving. Him and his complement will be here among many of the other races that are here for that same purpose. Now, when we get into the whole abductions and all of that, I've spoken to many abductees who have had horrific experiences. One man was brought to me in the 90s, and he was so freaked out. I've never seen so much fear in somebody's eyes, because he lifted up his lids and he showed me where these aliens had put a thing around the back of his eye so that everything he sees, they see. And I saw the actual apparatus, and he said, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to like go get these things out? He goes, but I know if I go and they pop my eyeballs out, is that going to hurt my vision with them trying to detach it? And even if they did, they would just put them back. Right. So this man was in a real quagmire, Other people had, prongs sticking out of the top of their mouth of things that had gone wrong. My friend Chris Bledsoe, who has the UFO of God out, the Lady of Light that Doug Ald drew, he has a tracker in his arm, and he goes like this, and he moves it around, with a magnet, and all of that, and I'm very close with Barbara Lamb and Yvonne Smith, and I've talked to them at length. And Yvonne says in the beginning it's very frightening because they don't understand what it is, right? And she said, but as time goes on, just like Whitley Strieber,
right,
that they start to realize that there's a spiritual purpose for it, and that they're spiritually growing from it, and that they usually get some kind of spiritual gift. Like all of a sudden they may be able to see something, or they become extremely psychic, or they become proficient in a certain area of that kind of thing. I've heard that even in the Allagash abductions, that happened as well. I've talked to Raymond Fowler. One of my favorite stories was the Andreessen affair. I was able to talk to Betty before she passed, and and I talked to Bob DeLuca, and that was just a fascinating one, and a lot of the things that happened to her happened to me in my waking experience, right? So that's why I was very drawn to that story, because it all had a spiritual background. None of my stuff was ever frightening. It was always based in love. I always felt love, and that's how I grew. Now we have had some horrific things,
Craig, could I just jump in for 1 second?
Yeah.
I apologize profusely. It is 8:30 now. We'll keep the bridge up and keep this going, but normally the program ends at 8:30. Okay. So I'm going to keep it going. I'll keep recording. So it's up to, if you want to stay on, stay on. If not,
sure.
Yeah, that's fine too.
All right. Well, I'll finish this story, and then I think we'll see if Bruce is able to talk.
Yeah, Bruce has to get up very early tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
I do know.
So anyway, but we know from the Pascagoula incident that, Calvin Parker had the most horrible experience of his life. He said she was pure evil. And, when I spoke to him, because I put that incident in UFO Hotspots, that he won't even describe what she looks like. He wouldn't even do it with the publisher, because he said she was so evil that I think he was so afraid that if he described her, she would come back.
Yeah.
And that's really what I believed, but he told this story so many times, and just to see, what that man went through, you can definitely see it in his eyes. All right, Bruce, can you talk? Let's see. No, we're still not hearing you. Do you want to put your question in the chat?
Yeah, we're not hearing you, Bruce.
Yeah, Bruce says he's got 2 channels. He's trying to get one of the channels.
I see. Okay.
Okay. My name is Susan Johnson. I'm from iPhone 3, and I couldn't join through the Skype, the Zoom part, so I had to call in to join. but I was listening to Greg Campobasso, and he's describing Valiant Thor. The question I have is, did Valiant Thor have any interaction or any input, or was he responsible for the Greada Treaty that was signed by Eisenhower and the Tall Whites on the Air Force Base in California? And then there's also the thing about the Anunnaki and the negative ET Tall Whites. Now, you said that he's like Nordic or whatever. Is he involved with the Anunnaki in any way?
Well, I can't answer those questions, but knowing that he's a created being, I'm sure that he warned the powers that be about other influences and what to expect. Now, you have to remember during those times, especially with his proposal, which was, there was a lot in it in the detail, is that Nixon and Eisenhower were for it, right? But they were vetoed. And then if you actually listen to Eisenhower's farewell address, he talked about the evils of the military industrial complex, which was gaining its legs at that time. And so there was a lot of things that he could not do that where his hands were tied.
Now, were these factions that were controlling him like this, were they responsible for the Greada Treaty? Was Valiant Thor, did he have anything to do with the Greada Treaty?
I don't, well, I would just say I don't know the answer to that, but I would say that I don't think that he would have anything to do with treaties with other races, because all he would do was warn them about other races that are coming and, what to expect.
Was Valiant Thor aware of the negative ET Tall Whites that were coming here and exploiting the human race through the evil elite?
Well, I'm sure that he was.
Okay, Craig, just a kind of little change of pace here. As far as the agreement that Eisenhower struck and the warning that he gave us afterwards because of different factions, Pentagon having a certain aspect, I guess, that they were focused in on. What about the other alien species? Even though they are ostensibly part of an overarching organization, did each one have their own separate rules of engagement, some being more benign than maybe others?
Well, sure. There's, I would say that, part of Valiant Thor's job was to actually help Eisenhower understand the universal hierarchy, what was out there, what was visiting, all of those different things. We know that they were in contact with other races, even in the 30s. And but the nuts and bolts to all of those things, I don't know the actual answers to. I think what's out there, is maybe released documents or things like that. But I really don't know. All I could say is I wish my biological father was alive. I could ask him.
Good point. Good point.
Craig, is it your impression or understanding, or perhaps not, you may not have knowledge of it, that Valiant Thor or another individual, if you will, is currently in contact with the U.S. administration, the military, or other world leaders, or the UN, or any other entities at this point? Is it an ongoing communication or dialogue, or do you have any sense of that?
I would imagine that it would be, but I couldn't tell you.
You're not privileged
sure.
to that, right?
I'm
Okay.
not privileged to that information, but I would imagine if he was, that he would have remained in that role in some way, shape, or form, right?
Okay. Makes sense.
And maybe he skips the president. I don't know. Maybe he,
Who knows?
Who knows?
Okay. Thank you very much for that.
All
You're
right.
welcome.
Well, all right. I don't see any more hands going up, so I think, Craig, and I'm going to let you digest all of this, and this will be put up. I'll have it up on YouTube, and I'll send you the link where it's at.
Okay.
And
you've got the websites, right? strangeratthepentagon.com. And
let me do this.
Yeah, let's get your.
I sent them to you, Joe, on that last email. So if you want to copy and paste, so strangeratthepentagon.com. People can watch a short film there, or you can watch it on Amazon Prime. I have all of Dr. Frank's books. There we go. There's the documentary poster. So if you guys are going to be at Contact,
Is that the next place you're speaking, or you're going to be?
I will be there, and we're going to do a panel afterwards. It's a Saturday night, Saturday, June 1st, 2024.
Excellent.
And we'll do a panel afterwards. It'll be me, Paul Hynek, JJ Desiree Hurtak, Vivian Chauvette, and whoever else is there at the event will all be on the panel. So on strangeratthepentagon.com, all of Dr. Frank's out of print books are there, including Stranger posters. And I have, I think, 10 DVDs left of the short film. So once those are gone, they're gone. And then autobiography of unanet.com. On the homepage is where you can get the autobiography of an extraterrestrial saga books. And then if you click on other books, is where you can get the ET Species Almanac and the UFO Hotspot. And if you get them on the website, I personalize them and send them to you guys. If you didn't have anything to write it down with, if you just type in Craig Campobasso into Google, all those websites will come up as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Greg. It was a fun evening tonight. A lot of
very fun. Very fun. I'm sorry I didn't get to talk to you, Bruce.
Still can.
I know. Is he? He's just a talking mouth. We can't hear him.
Joe, you can drop that screen share, Joe.
Anyway. All right, guys. Thank you so much. It was great talking to you all.
Thank you for your time and your insights, and very interesting meeting. I'm going to contact you again. I want to talk to you about the film industry and some other stuff that wasn't pertinent tonight. So thank you for your time. Absolutely. We all appreciate it, and appreciate everyone who joined us also. Thank you.
Yes, appreciate everyone. Bye,
everybody. We can do it again.
Good night, Craig.
Yeah.
Good meeting you all.
Bye, Sophia. Bye, Robert. Bye, Bruce. Bye, Joe. Bye,
Good night, everyone. Okay.
Good night.